Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a really counterintuitive idea about power and, well, about human relationships. It's a concept that kind of goes against something we all think is a good thing, trusting our friends. Okay, let's get right into it.
So let me just start with a direct question for you. Who do you think is more likely to betray you? Is it the person you call your closest friend, or someone you've always thought of as an enemy? Just take a second. Your gut instinct? It's probably wrong.
Because, you see, the real threat, at least according to this particular law of power, it doesn't usually come from your obvious rival. Nope, it often comes from the one person you would least suspect, your best friend. And this whole explainer is going to break down exactly why that is.
And here's the law itself. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. Now, hold on, this isn't just about being cynical or a bad person. It's meant to be a strategic principle, right? It's based on a really cold, hard look at human nature, things like envy, gratitude, and the weird ways that power can change, well, everything.
So, to really see what happens when you get this law wrong, we've got to go back in time to the Byzantine Empire and look at the pretty tragic story of Emperor Michael III. This is a perfect case study in what not to do.
So Michael needed a right-hand man, someone he could trust completely. Now, instead of picking his uncle, who was super experienced and qualified, he picked his best friend, a guy named Basilius, who used to be a peasant, a stable boy. Michael literally plucked him from total obscurity, gave him an education, and just showered him with unimaginable gifts, money, and power. He trusted him with his life. And how was that trust repaid? With one of the most brutal betrayals you can imagine. First, Basilius uses his new power to turn Michael against his own family, convincing him to murder his own uncle. Then he gets arrogant. He starts refusing to pay back the enormous debts he owes to Michael, the guy who gave him everything. And the final step, Basilius sends assassins to murder Emperor Michael in his sleep.
By the time Michael finally understood what was happening, it was way, way too late. He hadn't just hired a friend. He had basically armed his own executioner. As the story goes, he realized he had created a monster that was born from his own misplaced kindness.
Okay, now, let's flip that tragic story on its head and look at a ruler who understood this law perfectly. We're going to jump to 10th century China, where Emperor Sung faced a very similar problem but handled it like an absolute genius.
You see, Sung had been a general himself, so he knew the game. He knew the history. The same powerful commanders who helped him get the throne, his supposed friends, were the exact same guys who would eventually try to kill him for that throne. It was a totally predictable, vicious cycle.
But instead of violence, Sung used psychology. It was brilliant. He invited all his top generals to a huge feast, and he disarmed them, not with guards, but with honesty. He just told them flat out that he lived in constant fear of their ambition. Then, he gives them an offer they can't refuse. Give up your armies, and in return, I will give you so much wealth and so many estates, you'll live in luxury for the rest of your lives. He turned a pack of dangerous wolves into happy retirees, all without a single drop of blood.
And get this, that was only part one of his strategy. He didn't just sideline his friends, he actively recruited his former enemies. When a captured rebel king was afraid his wine was poisoned, Sung drank from the cup himself to prove it was safe. When he found out another defeated king was secretly plotting against him, he didn't have him executed. He honored him in public, basically showing him, I know what you're up to, but I'm choosing mercy. And in both cases, you know what he got? Unbreakable loyalty.
So, okay, we have two emperors, two totally different stories, right? Why? What is the psychological engine that's driving all of this? The betrayal on one side and the loyalty on the other. Let's break down the anatomy of it. So here's the core of it. When you hire a friend, that act of kindness, it can actually create a weird power imbalance. They might feel like they owe you a debt they can never really pay back. And over time, that feeling can curdle into resentment and even envy. But when you hire a former enemy, they have everything to prove. Your success becomes tied to their second chance, and that breeds gratitude, not resentment.
I mean, just look at the differences here. A friend in a position of power, they can be motivated by envy. They might expect endless favors just because of your shared history. And they're probably going to hide uncomfortable truths to avoid a fight. But a former enemy, their motivation is gratitude. They expect nothing, so they're grateful for everything. And the relationship stays clear and professional. The strategic choice here, it kind of becomes obvious, doesn't it?
And this brings us to a really crucial point. This isn't just about avoiding friends. It's about actively understanding the value that's hidden in your opposition. Your enemies are actually way more useful than you probably think.
So instead of fearing your enemies, try thinking of them as an untapped gold mine, a rival, a competitor. Their existence forces you to be better. It keeps you sharp, focused, on your toes. Without that constant pressure, it's so easy to become lazy and unfocused. Remember, a former enemy will work harder just to prove their new loyalty. And from a strategic point of view, a person of power actually welcomes conflict. I mean, look at Mao Zedong. He used the gigantic conflict with the Japanese invasion not just as a war he had to win, but as a brutal training ground to forge an army that was strong enough to beat his real internal rivals later on. Talk about playing the long game.
You know, this quote from Abraham Lincoln just perfectly captures the highest level of this idea. He said, "Do I not destroy my enemies when I make them my friends?" The ultimate victory isn't about crushing the person, it's about destroying the enmity itself.
But of course, no law is absolute. So you're probably asking, is there ever a time when you should turn to a friend in a high-stakes situation? And the answer is yes, but it is incredibly risky.
There are a couple of really rare exceptions. A friend's personal affection for you might make them willing to do the dirty work that a normal employee would never touch. And historically, rulers have often used their close friends as convenient scapegoats, the fall of the favorite, to take all the blame when things inevitably go wrong.
But, and this is a huge but, let's be absolutely crystal clear. Using a friend in this way almost always destroys the friendship. The emotional fallout is massive. So if you ever even think about it, you have to be constantly on guard for those two telltale signs that a friendship is souring under pressure: envy and ingratitude.
And all of that leaves us with one last question to chew on. As you look at the people around you, in your work, in your life, ask yourself this: who has more to prove? The person who feels like you already owe them something because you're friends, or the person who feels like they owe everything to the opportunity you've just given them? The answer, well, it might just surprise you.